How's it going, everyone? My name is Zach. Welcome to the channel. So today we're going to be talking about the second episode of the Witcher show. It's called 4 Marks. It's mostly a story about Yennefer, but we do get a little bit of Geralt and Ciri. So before we get started, I'm going to talk about the timeline a little bit, because I've been seeing comments all over YouTube, and a lot of people say they are confused about the sequence of events. Alright guys, so I'm going to try to make this as simple as possible for you so you can understand it clearly. Yennefer's story is the oldest, hers is the farthest in the past. Geralt's is somewhere in the middle, and then Ciri's is in the future. So it's probably going to stay like that for most of the season until these characters start actually finding each other, and then you'll know what's happening at the same time. But there is a couple of ways that the episode tells you how you can kind of figure this out on your own, although it is kind of hard to catch. So in Yennefer's story, we hear about the Great Cleansing, and she talks about how her dad was a half-blood elf. So the Great Cleansing was a time when humans were just trying to pretty much kill all of the elves, and her dad was killed in this Great Cleansing. And seeing that she's not that old, we know this happened fairly recently. Now moving on to Geralt's story, he meets an elf called Falavandrel. He's called King of the Elves. He's been pushed into these mountains away from civilization to avoid the humans. Like, the humans have kind of pushed them to the edge of extinction at the edge of the world. Now this King Falavandrel talks about the Great Cleansing and how everyone he knew, all his family, all his elders were killed. And he talks about it as if it was far in the past. Now elves live a lot longer than humans. They can be hundreds of years old. So this guy, Falavandrel, at this time is probably at least 100. So he's talking about this as if it was in the far past than where they are now. Now in Ciri's story, we hear that this elf king Falavandrel has come down from the mountains to start attacking humans again. So we know this is farther in the future, because in Geralt's story he's pushed back into the mountains and living there. And in Ciri's story, now he's come down, so that's a pretty decent chunk in the future. So I hope you guys understand the timeline a little bit better before we actually talk about the episode. I understand on the first viewing it is hard. I've watched it a couple times, and I did understand things more on the second watch, and I've even read the books. So it's definitely confusing, I understand, but hopefully that helped you. Alright guys, so getting into the actual stories of the characters, I'm going to try to summarize each of their storylines as quickly as possible so you don't get bored. So starting with Yennefer, once again, hers is the farthest in the past. We see she is crippled. She's not crippled, she has physical deformities. She has a hunchback, her jaw is pushed to the side, and because of this she's treated very poorly. She's abused by people in the village and her father. Well, this pushes her to actually activate some kind of magical power she didn't know she had. So she teleports unknowingly, and she meets a man named Istrid. Well, Istrid is a sorcerer with the Brotherhood of Sorcerers, and we'll see him again later on, but he pulls her back to her village, and because of this activation of her magical powers, a sorceress comes to her house. They can kind of sense when these things happen in the world, and she wants to buy Yennefer. Her dad sells her for less than a pig. He sells her for 4 marks, whereas he wanted to sell the pig for 10 marks. It's a pretty sad scene. Pretty much her whole story overall this episode is pretty sad. Her life sucks. So we go and we see her where she has been brought by the sorcerer. She's in a tower. It's pretty much a training school for sorceresses. She tries to kill herself. She can't do anything right. She can't pass any of the trials. Pretty much she's the worst one there. She can't lift a stone. She can't catch lightning in a bottle. Now she does use her emotions in that moment where she fails to catch lightning in the bottle and shoot that lightning back at someone. And that is when she's told she cannot ascend if she can't get control of her emotions. As you can see, she's been continuing to cut her wrists, not to kill herself this time. She's doing it horizontally, but she's still not in control of her emotions. So as a test, she wants her to get this flower from Istrid, who she has formed a bond with. Now, I kind of skipped over that. Istrid is also in training. He's not a full-blown sorcerer yet. He's in training under the Brotherhood of Sorcerers. So it's kind of weird. They got 2 different schools. They got a school for males and a school for females. And she's kind of formed a bond with him throughout her time here in training. He's the only one who's been kind to her and supportive. And so they form kind of like a love relationship. They kiss at one point. And then we also get that scene of the dialogue I talked about earlier, where she learns about the Great Cleansing from Istrid and talks about her father. Now that's a key point. They're both kind of used against each other. Istrid is being used by his superiors to get information on Yennefer, and Yennefer is using him as a test so she can ascend. So at this point we don't know if either one of their feelings for each other is true. So at the end of the episode we get to see what happens to sorcerers who are not selected to ascend. So they're pretty much killed in a way. The teacher takes away their control, turns them into ills, and then they just serve as conduits to power this place of magic, this Aretuza, where they've been training this whole time. Yennefer is called down there, told to push her friends into the water, so she does it, and you can see that there's hundreds of ills in this water, so they've been doing this for a long time, turning women into ills that do not meet their standards, which in turn allows them to continue training future sorcerers, using their power, this conduit, to fuel this place of magical energy. Alright, so moving on from Yennefer's story, we're going to talk about Geralt. So this adventure with Geralt is actually a short story from the books called The Edge of the World. It's much longer in the books than the show depicts. That's one thing I've noticed from the first few episodes I've watched, is that they're taking these stories from the books that are really fleshed out in a decently long story, and they're condensing them down to literally the base scenes that you need to understand them. So if you at all like these storylines in the show, I would definitely recommend reading the books because they are very enjoyable, and I have liked all of the short stories I've read so far. So his story starts off in a tavern, and we see a bard singing. Now this is Jaskier, I'm not quite sure how to say that name correctly, but I'm going to call him Dandelion because in the English books, as well as the games, that is who this is. His name is Dandelion. So anytime I say Dandelion, just know I'm talking about the bard. He's singing in this tavern. He gets a response from everybody but Geralt, who's sitting in a corner. So he goes and talks to Geralt, and he kind of deduces who he is by the way he looks, his white hair, his two swords, and he says, "Oh, you're Geralt of Rivia." He says it out loud. Everyone in the bar hears him. And so Geralt gets up to leave, and he's offered a job by one of the people in the tavern. He says there is a devil stealing all of their grain, pretty much their food source, from the town, and he's going to pay Geralt 150 coins to go kill this thing. Geralt accepts, of course, and he heads out to do this. Now Dandelion wants to accompany him. Geralt kind of reluctantly agrees and just lets him tag along. Now Dandelion's reason for wanting to accompany him is kind of mutually beneficial. Dandelion wants to experience these adventures firsthand so he can write better ballads. And he also is saying, I can change your reputation, because this is after the Butcher of Blaviken, the first episode. Dandelion actually calls him Butcher of Blaviken. So Dandelion is just wanting to help change Geralt's reputation as this butcher into something more upstanding, something more respectable that people won't be afraid of. So they finally reach their destination. They come to this field of tall grass, and they are hit in the head by these iron balls, these tiny iron balls. It actually knocks Dandelion out and just hurts Geralt. Geralt goes through the grass, gets charged by what is called a Sylvan. It's an intelligible creature. It's like a humanoid creature with hoofs for feet and horns on its head. And it can talk, and him and Geralt fight for a little bit and have a discussion. Those iron balls that he was throwing at them were used to poison him. They put it in the grain that he was taking so he would eat it and hopefully die. But instead, he did not die. He used it as weapons against them. And as they are fighting, Geralt is knocked out, and they are captured by the elves. Now when they wake up, Dandelion and Geralt are tied together. They're being held captive by the elves. So it turns out the Sylvan, whose name is Torque, was helping the elves. So he was stealing grain from the town to help feed the elves, who are now living in these mountain caves. So the elves hate the humans. We figure out why. So this ties back to Yennefer's story and the Great Cleansing. They meet the king of the elves, Filavandrel, and he explains to them why they're in these mountain caves. They used to live down in the valley, they used to live in the towns, but they were pushed to the edge of the world, hint the name of the story, where now they're living poorly, they're starving to death, they can't get food. They're pretty much struggling to survive out in the middle of nowhere because they've been pushed to this by humans. So their hate for humans is understandable. So they plan on actually killing Geralt and Dandelion because they don't want the town to know that they are living up there. They fear that if they let them go, then they're going to snitch on them and the town's going to come kill all of the elves. Geralt kind of talks his way out of it though, saying, I'm not human, I've learned to live with them, you can too. He shows his respect for the elves. He shows he's not the same as humans, he doesn't have the same beliefs. And Torque also kind of supports them as well to convince the elves, don't kill them, they're not bad people. Something that ties into Ciri's story is that Geralt says come down from the mountains, rebuild, get strong, and learn how to live with the humans. Filavandrel says not now, maybe one day I'll come down from the mountains. And then they let Geralt and Dandelion go. Geralt gives them all the coin he was paid, all 150 coins, and they give Dandelion their elvish loot, because while they were tied up they broke Dandelion's loot. So you can see Geralt's actually a good guy. He gave all his coin to these elves to help them survive. And so their story ends with them walking away, and Dandelion is creating a ballad of their adventure that they just had. He starts singing it. Geralt's like, that's not even how it happened, and Dandelion says, respect doesn't make history. So a lot of Dandelion's ballads that he writes through all of their adventures are embellished. They're not the true events of what happened. Because if he sang about what truly happened, people wouldn't like it. People want to be entertained. They want fantastical stories with grand battles and grand outcomes. And that's not always what actually happens. Alright, so moving on to Ciri's story. It picks up right where we left off from episode 1. She's running through the forest. Nilfgaard is hot on her trails. You can see them on their horses behind her. She camouflages her hair either to blend in with her surroundings or to hide her distinct hair color, that ashen blonde hair. She meets a boy in the woods. He kills a rat, they cook it, and he gives her some food. And then they go their separate ways when she finds a Centurion refugee camp. So she goes into this camp. She meets a boy who's wearing a necklace with a bunch of elf ears on it. Now this is what ties in with Geralt and King Filavandrel. He says, these are the ears of elves that I've killed from King Filavandrel's army. So from that we understand that Filavandrel has come down from the mountains like Geralt suggested he do, but instead of trying to live with the humans and rebuild, he's actually attacking them. This boy takes Ciri to his family. She lies about who she is. She says her name is Fiona. She doesn't want them to know she is actually Princess Cirilla. The mother expresses her hate for Calanth. She blames this situation on Calanth, saying she's always getting into battles, and pretty much she's just berating Ciri's dead grandma, and Ciri has to kind of sit there and take it. The mother of this family makes their slave dwarf give Ciri his boots. You can kind of see in our world it's like racism. They look down on dwarfs and elves, and they kind of use them as their slaves. So she makes him give up his boots to Ciri. He does not look happy about it. Cut to later on in the episodes, their camp is under attack. The mother is once again berating that dwarf for dropping their belongings and slaps him, which pushes him over the edge, and he stabs her to death many times right in front of Ciri. And she's actually saved from the tent by the boy who helped her earlier. He cuts her out of the tent, and they're running through the camp, which is under attack by Nilfgaard. Nilfgaard is killing everybody in sight. We see the Nilfgaardian with the feather on his helmet, and they actually get out of the camp without being detected. So the episode ends with them running off into the woods once again. So I really enjoyed this episode. Once again, I would probably give it a 7 out of 10. I feel like the story was better than the first episode, but the action was not there like the first episode. So it equals out. I really enjoyed Yennefer's story. They really make you feel for her and her past, because later on in the books and in the games, you can tell she's very full of herself. She's very proud. And seeing where she came from, how she started out from nothing, is a pretty cool storyline. I wish they didn't have to cut down the short stories from the book about Geralt's adventures so much, because they're such good stories, but I understand it's television and they kind of have to do that. So if you enjoyed the explanation and it helped you understand the episode a little better, consider leaving a like. It would really help out my channel a lot, and subscribing if you want to see more of these explanation videos. I should be doing one of these for each of the episodes. Leave your comments below about what you thought about the episode, if you liked it, if you didn't like it. So once again guys, I would like to thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.